Welcome to Kubernetes SIG Cloud Provider. It is Wednesday, January 17th, 2024, a date which definitely exists and is real. And we are here today to talk about cloud provider stuff. I'm going to share the screen real quick. We can take a look at open issues. Elmiko, I think you have some exciting issues to talk about. Let's see.
Really, it's Dim's issue, but it is quite exciting for us.
It is. It is. Actually, do you want to share that real quick just so that you can kind of point and walk through it? Because it suddenly occurs to me like if I share it, be
Yeah,
slightly confusing.
I haven't spent a ton of time reviewing it this morning, but I'm happy to
Mhm.
go over it. Let me see. Could you make me co-host real quick?
Oh, sorry. Computers. How do they even?
Yeah, totally.
There we go.
So
How was everybody's break?
mine was great, very relaxing.
Right. E to E tests.
Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this. I'll just try and make it a little bit bigger. So DIMS has kindly gone through the E2E tests that will be slated for removal when we drop the cloud providers. And these are tests that I think are calling like provider specific behaviors and whatnot. And so one of the things that DIMS had mentioned in the Slack thread that I linked in the agenda was that they're going to need to reach out to like SIG Network and to SIG Storage because they own the majority of the tests here that are being targeted. Because they'll have to start to figure out some way to test these things outside of the tree. Now, this I think feeds into some of the work that I had been trying to get into in terms of externalizing our CCM tests. So hopefully when that discussion happens, I could at least participate to share kind of some of the work that I've been doing, because even though I got interrupted, I think there's a pattern there that we could reuse. So hopefully some of this will come up. But I think a lot of the work that's going to happen in 1.30, and I think if I read Dim's message right, it might extend into 1.31, is removing these tests and providing whatever replacements that SIG storage and SIG networking are coming up with. And that will be like we'll need to remove those before we can finally remove the cloud providers completely. Walter, I see you got your hand up.
Um, so I mean, you could claim it's more of a proof of concept, but I know that for some of I think it was the ANP tests, we actually we have sort of this weird dance that we do where we pull in the cloud provider images from a repo and then bring up a cloud provider cluster so that we can actually have things like the CCM running. Now, presumably that same model could also be used to then bring I'm not sure about the SIG network issues, but for SIG storage, that same models could presumably be used to bring up the CSI portions of a CCM. And so at that point, we'd be leaning heavily on the cloud provider configurations, but we have a model for doing cloud provider specific testing. And so I'm wondering if that is something that we want to lean on a little more heavily for some of this.
Yeah, it's a great thought, Walter. And I think SIG storage is pretty much ahead of the game in this respect, because when the CSI motion or migration happened a while ago, they pushed themselves to come up with a pattern for how they could do that. And so the CSI driver repos themselves contain like test configurations that can be run using a common tool. And that's the inspiration that I took to explore the CCM testing route as well. So I think you're right. I think probably if we keep going in that direction, and especially if we can talk with SIG storage about this, there's probably like a common pattern there that we could start to replicate. Like I was trying to do with CCMs, I'm sure networking could look at it, probably in a similar light as well. But I know like some of these networking tests, I've looked at them and I know they have code included in them that is like, gating on which provider it is and then trying to make calls into those providers. So I'm sure those tests are going to have to be either just turned off or replaced or something.
It's also worth mentioning that there's a distinction between a test that checks what the provider is and a test that actually depends on like third-party modules that call the cloud provider, because the whole Ginkgo like E2E testing framework has this notion of a provider where you basically pass into the test, like where you're running the test. And there are tests where we'll create like a service type load balancer on only if you're on like GCE or AWS. But the actual code that's exercised in the test doesn't actually invoke the cloud provider at all. It just creates like the service API. And so it's possible that there's like a large chunk of these tests that are actually provider agnostic in the actual implementation, but it's just gated by what provider the test is running on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think you're right. I think some of these tests, you're right, they're more like functionality or behavioral based. But I know some of the networking ones in specific, we're trying to do things like, check that load balancers were created and stuff like that. Those are the ones I think are more problematic.
Well, and I think the other, because I have occasionally had to venture into those. Some of the odder things in the networking test is things like, hey, if the node loses connection to the network and then it gets reestablished, does everything continue to work? And while that may be a generic test, the mechanisms that they use to break and reconnect to the network are actually very much cloud provider specific, because things like, how do you do the network service hookup is actually not dictated by Kubernetes, and each cloud provider does it differently.
Absolutely. So just for the sake of kind of exploration and whatnot, this is where the external storage tests are located in the KK repo. And this really holds the definitions for how SIG storage defines, how these external, things will be set up and how you would run it from there. I'm thinking that, probably some pattern like this is going to be similar for the CCMs, where we would see, a CCM owner would put some sort of configuration file, like, not like this, but, something configure in their repo. And then we would have a way to run these tests using the common Ginkgo by, specifying what configuration file should be used and those kind of things. And this was like, I had done something similar. And I would, unfortunately, like I said, we're all pressed for time and everything. But
I think I linked to one of your issues around that too in the chat.
Oh, cool. Thank you. So I had tried to follow the pattern that that storage was using, right? So like in our cloud provider, am I looking at the wrong directory or something? Somewhere we had a cloud provider directory, yeah, cloud. And I had started to do something similar where we would have like an external thing that would have the framework, and we'd be able to start like building tests through this in a similar manner. So maybe when we get to the point where we start discussing this, I can kind of resurface some of this stuff, and it might be a path. Like I'm almost at the point where I have the initial smoke test running. I got interrupted by, hashtag job.
Almiko, I had a colleague who was interested in getting involved with cloud provider stuff. And I'm kind of wondering if we have an enthusiastic person who wants to work on this. Is this one of those ones where you can get it into enough shape where someone else could help work on it? Is that possible, do you think?
I absolutely think that's possible. Like, I think we are close enough, and I've got enough artifacts that, like, if I could spend some time with someone pairing up, I could probably hand this off in a way that they could continue, the work. Now there's, unfortunately, the downside of this is, like, the first part of this work that gets finished, we'd have to probably come up with an enhancement. This is what we had talked about last year, come up with an enhancement to describe how this testing works. And then, that'll be the next step. But I mean, it's a great opportunity for someone who wants to get into all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Okay. I did link to the other issues that are older from this particular topic as well. And we can follow up on that. I'll take the action item of connecting that colleague of mine with you. Okay, is there anything else about this one that we should do anything? All right, let's take a look. Oh yes, go ahead.
Well, we might want to leave a comment on the issue that Dim's raised, just like bringing some of these links together and stuff like that.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great, wonderful. All right, next up. Sorry for skipping you, Joel. I was excited about triage because it turns out triage had a bunch of these related issues in it. But if you want to take a quick, take us through this AWS load balancer implementation. Hopefully Kirthan will have some insights.
Yeah, so if you're not engaged with the AWS land, you may not be aware, but in February this year, they will start charging for Elastic IPs. Previously, they haven't charged for them. You could use them for free, attach them to your EC2 instance, etc., whatever. Load balancers, of course, is an important place to attach those. But now they're going to be charged something like $0.005 an hour or something. Like, it's not a huge amount, but obviously adds up. So if you don't want to pay for Elastic IPs, they do support this concept of bring your own IP. You have your own reserved IPv4 public block. You can set that up and use those for your load balancers or your instances. Now, at the moment, you can use these Elastic IPs, bring your own IPs on NLBs, but you have to give a specific Elastic IP allocation ID in an annotation on the service to do so. That doesn't scale very well. Imagine I'm running a platform, I've got lots of people on my platform who want to create services and create NLBs. Every time they want to, I as a cluster administrator want to enforce policy, they should be using one of my IPs, not AWS's. I want to enforce that they can use an IP from a particular IPv4 pool. So there's been a couple of issues opened and closed about this, both on the AWS CCM and on the AWS Load Balancer controller. I understand that at the moment, NLBs still don't support directly adding the load balancer pool as a create parameter or an update parameter. So you can't say, look, here's a pool, NLB API, go pick one from here. But I think this is going to be a major thing going forward with this charging of EIPs. So this is quite important to us. We've got a lot of spend committed with load balancers and that kind of stuff. So we would like to have a way to just say, here's a pool, pick an IP and have the CCM do that for us. Since the NLB doesn't support that currently, we were thinking maybe the CCM can go do it, right? It can go look up the pool, it can work out the EIPs it needs, one for each zone, whatever. I think the CCM should have enough information to be able to choose those IDs and then pass that on to the NLB. Before I dive too deep into this, I was hoping there'd be someone from AWS here, so it's good that Kirtan's here. Do we have any update on NLBs being supported, supporting an IPv4 pool parameter? Because I know that was asked on one of the issues. And if not, is this something we would be able to build into the CCM? Would it be accepted if we created a patch? Any feedback on what I've said, basically?
Hi, Jules. Thanks for that. So, I mean, I was looking to the issue. So I'm actually not fully aware of the internals of the NLB implementation in the CCM, at least from high level, what I was aware of, like at least from internal discussions, like the networking team, they are mostly diverting, asking the customers to move to using the AWS load balancer. And unfortunately, Kishore, I think I saw the issues like mostly that you had discussion with Kishore, but he had left AWS, and I don't think he's been actively looking at any of these issues for some time. So I can definitely like bring it up internally and ask and provide an update for you. But because I don't closely work with the load balancing aspect in this AWS cloud provider, so I don't have a definitive answer whether it will be accepted in CCM or whether they're going to add it in the AWS load balancer provider. But I can definitely bring it up and get you update this week itself. Like,
Yeah, that'd be great. If you can bring it up internally, hopefully there's an answer as to whether they're planning it or not. And maybe respond on the load balancer controller, the 2523 issue, the one that's open at the moment. Obviously I commented on that a couple of weeks ago. I'll
yeah,
get permission for
yeah,
that.
I saw your comment. Like, yeah, but yeah, I
Yeah.
think I'll bring it up to the other folks who are currently looking into the uh, ALB and CCM NLB related issues on that aspect of the cloud provider.
Cool. Yeah, and then once you've got an update, if it's a case that they're not working on that, then I would very much like to see if we can build this into the CCM, that like choosing logic. So I'll try and dedicate some time to that if that's likely at all to be accepted as a feature in the CCM directly, and build on top of the NLB functionality. So yeah, the sooner you can get that to me, the better, because we're fast approaching February, and as I say, like this is a big thing for us, both internally and for some of our customers. So we do want to try and get this fixed.
Yeah, sure. I'll definitely bring it up today itself. Like, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay, wonderful. Great. And I think one other thing before we can take a look at issue triage, there's one other thing, which is looking at the calendar. I think that by next time we meet, we will know exactly what the KubeCon schedule looks like. And then we can confirm who's going to be there, what the talk's going to look like. I know, Andrew, I believe you were listed on the talk, I think. So
Yeah, and Michael, the co-speaker.
and Michael, and you're pretty sure you're going to be able to make it at this point, or are you still figuring that out?
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
I have more confidence than previous years, but yeah, I guess won't know until the budget is finalized.
Okay, great.
Yeah, but is there anyone on the call now that's like for sure going at this point?
I think there's a good percentage chance that I will go, but just like you, I am waiting for the go ahead and buy a plane ticket.
Okay, cool.
So do not 100% know quite yet. Okay. I'm going to just pull up and share this KK, search of, this was just from the needs triage. This is just the ones with the needs triage label, which of course some are hilarious and old. And we talked about this E2E test removal one. Thank you, Alnico. And then there was one other flaky test one from the last month before we start going into 2021. So let's take a quick look at this and see if there's, what do we think about this GCP test, folks? Looks like we discussed this 2 weeks ago. What do we think? Do we have any updates on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I just saw that they had pinged another person there, but it seems like that person maybe hasn't had a chance to respond yet or something.
Okay. Do we have anybody who wants to speak on behalf of GCP for this one?
Looks like we wanted some input from the node folks, and then
Yeah, that was kind of what we had come to 2 weeks ago, is that this
Okay.
is this needs input from SIG node to kind of drive it forward. So we're, unfortunately for us, even though it hits the CCM, it's more of a SIG node question. So we kind of need them to take a look.
that seem like a reasonable? And that would be before SIG Cloud Provider can really say anything, or like what outcome are we looking at for SIG to come up with
I think
so that we can be unblocked?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to need to triage it and figure out what the problem is, because I think and I can't speak as an expert on this, but I'm just recalling what we talked about last time. Even though this is like where people are seeing the problem is coming through the CCM, the problem is actually happening at a deeper layer in the node. So we probably need to get advice from them to figure out, okay, like, is this something that needs to be fixed in the code that they're SIG owns, or is there a change that we could make in the CCM that would affect this? But we need their input to kind of understand that. That's my resuscitation of what we talked about last time.
Okay, I'm just putting a little bit more of a comment on, just so that it's clear that I don't want to untag SIG Cloud Provider, but like it's clear that we're not really working on this one. Okay, Walter.
Sorry, I had to step out, so I don't have the full context here. But I'm guessing beyond CCM, this is probably also has to do with the pod lifecycle controller. And the one thing I will say is, if at some level, if it isn't clear where the error is, even if the error is exactly as you say, Almiko, much deeper in the stack, it probably behooves us to take a look at where that error is being surfaced and see about improving our logging.
Okay.
It makes way too much sense, Walter.
I am just putting a note saying that you said that on the issue. And by the way, I'm putting the issue that we're talking about in the chat, just so it's clear. Okay. Do we have anything else? The agenda is drained. Do we have anything else that we want to chat about? Anyone have anything else on their mind? All right. Great seeing you all. Same bad time, same bad channel, 2 weeks. All right. Take care.
Thanks, Bridget.